Okay, so we're going to dive into a little bit more detail about what trains our brains. We already covered thoughts, traumas, toxins, technology, then affect the dopamine and adrenaline systems. But what does that mean as far as the neuroanatomy is concerned? So the for simplicity's sake, we're going to break down the neuroanatomy for today's conversation into two basic concepts. Think of gas pedal or go, and brake pedal slow. So we have the gas pedal, which is the fight or flight nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. Gas pedal, go, fight or flight. And when you think about that, think about the amygdala, which we're going to cover in the next slide also. But the amygdala is the part of our brain that is the emotional headquarters, and it is the reaction. Uh, think of a toddler throwing a fit. No reasons, just pure rage. Think about the amygdala. That's the amygdala. And then you think about the brake pedal, the prefrontal cortex. That is the slow down, rest, digest, develop, and heal. Two different parts of our brain. So let me ask you a question. Let's say you do a bunch of these bicep curls. What happens to your bicep? It gets bigger, right? What about this? If you do a bunch of tricep extensions, what happens to your triceps? It gets bigger. The process of adaptation that we already hit on, it's also called the Wolff's Law, meaning part of your body that is a consistent and recurring stress will adapt in order to then become more resilient or stronger. And weight training has been shown to increase bone density at an early age. We just gave the example of weightlifting for muscles, of course. Same thing with cardiovascular exercise. You do a lot of cardio, your cardiovascular system becomes stronger. And the same exact thing happens within our brain. Our brain is trained the same way that our body does. So the amygdala, this is where, in my opinion, we get stuck in the vicious cycle, because the amygdala, its job is to keep us safe and perceive danger. So let's go back in time, 300,000 years ago, 200,000, let's go 250. Life is pretty simple. We get food and we don't die. And so let's say we are out looking for food, and then all of a sudden we see a lion come after Bill, kill Bill. Bill's dead now. Our amygdala goes, lion, that is not conducive to survival. So you get your adrenaline hit, you run away from that lion, get away from it. Ooh. And then while you're having this adrenaline response, this fight or flight response, the amygdala is doing its job. It's automatic also, it's fast. And it says, hey, we don't need to worry about repairing right now because we are in danger. We could die. And so we don't need to rest, we don't need to digest, we don't need to develop, we need to survive right now. So adrenaline floods the system, and then as we run away, we tear up our feet because we're running. We don't have shoes at this point in history, and our feet are all cut up. We're tearing our muscles. We're running as hard as we can, and we get away from the lion. And then once the lion's gone, then our brain says, "All right." Amygdala says, "Did my job." The prefrontal cortex says, "Okay, it's time to do my job. Now I'm going to rest, digest, develop, and heal." And so now what prefrontal cortex does is it starts to initiate the process of healing. And then adaptation occurs, meaning, well, we just survived, so gosh, that was all good. So let's toughen up the bottom of our feet so we can run a little bit easier without cutting our feet up. Let's strengthen our muscles so that we can run faster, and let's get more efficient at pumping blood. Let's increase that cardiovascular output. Let's do that. And then this is the doozy. Let's get better at identifying where lions are. Brain does this. So now our brain says, okay, that lion is over down the water hole. It's there in midday. Let's not go there. That's not good. That's not very conducive for survival. So now our amygdala is just as sensitive as was there. It's just as automatic as it was then, and it's just as reactive. And so now what we have is this process where there's a negative comment on Facebook. There is a pandemic that just happened, right? Remember that? How do you think our amygdala responded to that one? Stay home or die. Better yet, stay home. And if you do interact with your grandma, grandpa, or loved one, you could kill them. What do you think our amygdala is doing there? Oh my, danger, danger, danger. In that part of our system, our fight or flight response, our amygdala got super, super strong. And so now, and again, when we look at our other training aspects here, dopamine is supposed to be the reward center, meaning in nature, if you procured food or a mate, your brain would say, give you dopamine. Good job. Survival, and then also propagation of the species. But now we can simply look down at our phone, and they figured out how to use light patterns to trick our brain into artificially giving it dopamine. But then that is a non-adaptive response. Well, it's an adaptive response still, because the brain says, well, we don't need to produce our own dopamine. We get it artificially, so I can downregulate it. And that's where the depressions come in. And that's especially, people say, I can unplug from my phone for a bit. I just feel so much better. It's because your brain is forced to produce dopamine on its own. And we're going to cover that in a lot more detail in one of the later sections about being dope. So if we can see here, especially during the pandemic, there were significant periods of time where there was no, okay, the lion's gone. It was simply constant bombardment of danger signals, which meant the amygdala was getting stronger, getting more integrated, getting more wires connected within the brain, getting more reactions. And there's an automatic process that happens. And Ivan Pavlov studied this in great detail with the study where he figured out classical conditioning, meaning took a dog, showed the dog food, measured saliva. And then he started to ring a bell when the food was coming out. And then the dog then started to associate the bell with the food coming. So it got to the point where they could simply ring a bell and the dog would start salivating, even if they didn't bring food out. Meaning whatever associations are happening during this training process of the brain is becoming automatic. Let's act as if there's food coming, even though there's no food. Let's act as if there is danger, even though there is no danger. It becomes automatic. So what do we do? What do we do to understand and then break this cycle? Toxicity is simply energy stuck. And when we have that fight, flight, freeze, fawn now is another common accepted one, response from that fight or flight mechanism, the amygdala is getting miggy with us. And then here's the thing that is where it gets a little more complicated, because now that we've just identified the piece of anatomy, neuroanatomy, that is giving us these undesirable feelings of stress, anxiety, and pain most times, now we know that part of our brain is bad, which simply means thinking about the amygdala is going to then trigger the amygdala. Oh, darn that part of our brain. So if you could, I can't play it here because I'll get in trouble for copyright infringement. Look up Will Smith getting jiggy with it. Listen to that song. It's Will Smith. He freaked out a while ago and had a little bit of a breakdown, which, as you can kind of understand, like, makes sense, right? Overactive amygdala. I'll smack someone on TV, fight or flight. And so to retrain the brain, a little trick is look up listen to, getting jiggy with it. And then when within yourself, when you start to notice a stress response, a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, just think of that song. Getting jiggy with it. No, not. To help begin the training process to get the amygdala to rev it on down. So if I can, let me move my picture here. Okay, so this is on our property up here, down here, I guess, if you're in the United States watching this, in the Dominican Republic. And yes, what you're seeing is a small pool and then another pool down below, and there is a waterfall that goes between that and that. And we named this location a symmetry oasis because an oasis experience is something that serves as a refuge, a relief, or pleasant change from what is usual annoying. In essence, it's anything that allows the amygdala to calm down in order to allow the prefrontal cortex to rev up in order to then adapt to the stressor. So anything that has come to the point of annoying is activation of the amygdala and tricking your brain into wanting to fight or flight or freeze, because that annoyance is simply a minor activation of the fight or flight response. Just like pain sensation within the nervous system is what's called nociception. And nociception is a gradient you can have, and it's, in our office, or if you've ever been to a chiropractor, they always ask, how are you feeling, right? Talk about your pain. What kind of pain is it? And because we can get a lot of information by the types of pains, just like you can get a lot of information from any kind of symptoms, right? An emotional status tells us exactly what kind of a neuroanatomy is overactive, or what kind of neuroanatomy needs to be balanced, or what kind of injury someone is dealing with. Broken arms feels quite a bit different than a not broken arm, and a sprained ankle feels quite a bit different than a broken ankle. A sprained ankle is actually way worse. Broken doesn't feel as bad as a sprain, even though, I don't know, it's, I guess, perceived to be a more significant injury. So nociception, the most minimal irritation of that is itch. So a mosquito bites you, then you have an itch. That's nociception. That's pain. And if you've ever heard the trick of, if you have a mosquito bite, then you put a cross into it, take your fingernail, press it in there. That's simply what's called neurological gating, meaning you're taking one pain signal that's minimal, and then you're overriding it with a larger one. And in essence, that's what an oasis experience is. Anything that takes your attention away from the thing that is annoying in order to be able to adapt to it is the oasis experience. Putting a little cross into the bug bite is an oasis experience. For me, stepping onto this property was an oasis experience, and diving into the pools is an oasis experience. Everything about this place is an oasis experience, which is because everything about here is natural. So nature heals. And so there's me and Callan at the beach. These are our three kids, Penny, Beckett, and Callan. We have a tilapia pond right as you first walk into the main building. And this place is all open air. It's in a jungle on the top of a mountain, and you can literally, just being in nature, immersed in nature, feel your body go as your body switches into gears to rest, digest, develop, and heal. And again, if we can think of develop as the process of adaptation, meaning the stress is then making you stronger. And this is a difficult thing for me, at least. I'm a big fan of David Goggins, and I believe wholeheartedly in a lot of his philosophies of like push harder, and do more and do more. And to a deficit where I took some honest introspection to realize that I was not getting stronger, right? Because that's again, the thing is, again, back to the biceps metaphor. If you do not have time to rest that bicep and you just keep pumping it, eventually it just fatigues and then breaks down. So nature, or being in a natural environment, again, an environment very much like the Garden of Eden they talked about early on in the presentation, allows our body to automatically get into this nervous system function. And that's where I want to again tell you to get Mickey with it, because sometimes that amygdala especially has been so overtrained, that fight or flight response. It's like, I just need to die. You just need to rest. I need to digest. And in essence, that thought of needing to then triggers that fight or flight response. And what we want to dive into today is that by implementing simple bits of nature that then reminds your prefrontal cortex of a natural environment, an environment that it was used to living in for so long, an environment where it says, oh, that's right, there aren't lions anywhere right now. Yes, there are, and then better run. It becomes automatic. And so as you can implement these tools that we're going to give you with today's and then the subsequent lectures, it becomes automatic. You simply implementing these strategies, there is no thought process. And that's the other thing about the prefrontal cortex. Imagine our brain as a supercomputer that figures out an answer before you ask a question. And many people call that being in a flow state. If you've ever been in a state where everything just becomes, it just is easy and there's a peace about it. And maybe it's been a bit since you've been there, but that is when the prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders, and you have perfect balance between the amygdala and the fight or flight, or the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Because the amygdala gives us that adrenaline, gives us that little bit of energy, but it only needs to hit it for a second in order to then get the adrenaline. It takes 24 to 48 hours for adrenaline to diffuse out of our system. So it doesn't take long for it to get going, but then it stays with us. And then getting that prefrontal cortex engaged then gives us the supercomputer skills with the energy combined.